The kingdom of Silvercrest had spent months preparing for the celebration. Banners decorated every street. Silver lanterns lined the capital's main avenues. Musicians traveled from distant territories. Noble families arrived from every corner of the kingdom. The event marked a historic milestone: 10 years of peace, 10 years of prosperity, 10 years of Alpha King Kalor Vieira and Luna Serafina Vieira ruling together. For most citizens, the anniversary felt like proof that the kingdom's future was secure. The royal couple had always appeared strong, stable, united, at least from a distance. The reality was more complicated, not because they fought constantly, not because scandal surrounded them, because something quieter had been happening, something easier to ignore: distance, the kind that grows slowly between two people until nobody remembers when it started. 10 years earlier, Kalor and Serafina had been inseparable. They attended meetings together, traveled together, built the kingdom together. Their partnership became one of Silvercrest's greatest strengths. But kingdoms have a way of changing people. Responsibilities multiplied, schedules filled, priorities shifted. Over time, they spent less time together, then less, then even less. Neither noticed how dangerous the pattern had become. Not until others began noticing first. Her name was Vivian Ashcroft, a beautiful noblewoman from one of Silvercrest's oldest families. At first, her presence seemed harmless. She attended charity events, royal hunts, diplomatic receptions, the same places dozens of nobles appeared every year. Then, people started seeing her everywhere, always near the king, always smiling when he spoke, always receiving his attention. The court immediately noticed. Courts always do. Rumors spread quickly through palace corridors. Servants whispered, nobles speculated, council members exchanged concerned looks. Yet nobody said anything openly, because accusing a king of impropriety required evidence. And technically, there wasn't any. No scandal, no public declarations, no confirmed affair, just appearances, repeated appearances. Unfortunately, appearances matter, especially when a Luna is standing nearby. One evening, during a royal banquet, a young noblewoman made the mistake of speaking too loudly. "I think she spends more time beside the king than the Luna does." The comment spread through the room instantly. Several guests looked toward Serafina, waiting for a reaction. She gave none. No anger, no tears, no public confrontation. She simply continued her conversation as though she hadn't heard. Many people interpreted that silence as weakness. Others interpreted it as indifference. Neither explanation was correct. Serafina cared deeply. She simply wasn't interested in competing for attention. Not with another woman. Not with anyone. Instead, she watched and waited. Because eventually, every person reveals who they are, especially when given enough opportunities. The anniversary celebration would provide one more opportunity, perhaps the final one. As sunset approached, thousands gathered inside the royal plaza. The kingdom waited. The royal family took their places upon the platform. The crowd cheered. The celebration began, and standing beside her husband, Luna Serafina wondered whether he truly understood what was about to be tested. The royal plaza had never been so crowded. Thousands filled the streets surrounding the palace. Citizens stood shoulder to shoulder beneath silver banners. Foreign ambassadors occupied reserved sections near the front. Noble families gathered beneath decorated pavilions. Every available space overflowed with people, all waiting to celebrate 10 years of peace. At the center of it all stood the royal platform. Alpha King Kalor Vieira occupied the throne-like ceremonial seat. Luna Serafina stood beside him. elegant, composed, every inch the Luna silver crest had admired for a decade. The crowd erupted into applause as the ceremony officially began. Musicians performed. Council elders delivered speeches. Foreign dignitaries offered congratulations. One by one, the kingdom's achievements were celebrated. The atmosphere remained festive, hopeful, proud, exactly as planned. Then Calor stepped forward. The applause doubled instantly. Whatever rumors existed within the palace walls, the people still loved their king. Calor smiled confidently. He always excelled at public appearances. For nearly 20 minutes, he addressed the crowd. He spoke about prosperity, growth, unity, the future of Silvercrest. The audience listened attentively. Everything seemed normal. Then something changed. Calor paused unexpectedly. His gaze shifted toward a section of nobles standing near the platform. A brief smile crossed his face. Not directed toward the crowd, toward someone specific. Several council members exchanged confused glances. The king raised one hand. "Before I continue," he announced, "there is someone whose support deserves special recognition." The crowd quieted. People looked around curiously. Who? A war hero? A trusted advisor? A foreign ally? Calor turned toward the noble section, then spoke a name. Lady Vivienne Ashcroft. A ripple of confusion spread through the plaza. Vivienne? The noblewoman stepped forward immediately. Beautiful, poised, prepared, as though she had known this moment was coming. The sight alone made several council elders visibly uncomfortable. Serafina remained still, her expression unchanged. Yet hundreds of eyes drifted toward her automatically, watching, waiting. Vivienne climbed the platform stairs gracefully. The crowd grew quieter with every step. Calor smiled warmly as she approached, far more warmly than protocol required, far more warmly than many thought appropriate. Still, nobody interrupted. The king gestured toward Vivienne. Over the past year, Lady Ashcroft has shown remarkable loyalty to this kingdom. The words echoed through the plaza. A few nobles shifted uneasily. Calor continued. Her intelligence, dedication, and unwavering support deserve recognition. The compliments themselves weren't the problem. The setting was. The timing was. The fact that Luna Serafina stood only a few feet away was. The crowd sensed it immediately. The atmosphere changed. Not dramatically, subtly. Like a storm gathering on the horizon. People stopped focusing on the speech. They started studying the platform. The king. Vivienne. The Luna. Something felt wrong. Dangerously wrong. Then Calor took another step toward Vivienne, close enough that whispers immediately spread through the crowd. The council elders looked alarmed now. One advisor actually stood from his seat, as if considering intervention. Too late, because the king had already made his decision. And moments later, he reached for Vivienne's hand. The moment Calor took Vivienne's hand, the royal plaza fell silent. Not gradually, instantly. Thousands of voices disappeared. The musicians stopped playing. Even the wind seemed to pause, because everyone understood what they had just witnessed. The gesture itself wasn't scandalous. A king could shake hands, offer assistance, show appreciation, but context changes everything, and standing only a few feet away was Luna Serafina, his wife, his partner of 10 years, the woman the celebration was supposedly honoring. The silence spread across the plaza like a wave. Nobles exchanged nervous looks. Foreign dignitaries watched with growing fascination. Council members looked horrified. One elderly elder rose abruptly from his seat. "Your Majesty." Warning filled his voice. Calor ignored him. Whether through arrogance or blindness, nobody knew. Perhaps both. Still holding Vivian's hand, he continued speaking. His smile never faltered. Silvercrest has prospered because of people willing to serve without seeking recognition. The irony was painful, almost unbearable, because the description fit another person standing on that platform far better than Vivian, Serafina. For 10 years, she had built charitable networks across the kingdom, negotiated community partnerships, resolved disputes, supported initiatives that transformed countless lives. Much of Silvercrest's success carried her fingerprints. Yet now, before the entire kingdom, someone else received praise that should have belonged to her. The crowd noticed, and the longer Kaelor spoke, the more uncomfortable the atmosphere became. People stopped looking at him. They started watching Serafina, waiting. Would she interrupt? Would she confront him? Would she finally react? The anticipation became almost unbearable. Vivian noticed it too. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face, because suddenly, she wasn't the center of attention anymore. The Luna was, not because she was speaking, because she wasn't. Serafina remained perfectly still, calm, composed, almost peaceful. The expression unsettled everyone, especially those who knew her, because anger would have been predictable. Tears would have been understandable. This serenity felt different, final. The realization spread through the council first, then the nobles, then the crowd. Something important was about to happen. Kaelor continued talking, still unaware, still praising Vivian, still making the same mistake. Then Serafina smiled, a small smile, barely visible. Yet somehow it commanded more attention than the king's entire speech. The plaza grew even quieter, if such a thing was possible. Slowly, Serafina lifted one hand. No one understood why. At first, then her fingers touched the Luna crown, resting upon her head. A collective breath caught across the kingdom. The crown wasn't jewelry. It wasn't decoration. It represented marriage, duty, partnership, the trust between ruler and Luna. For 10 years, Serafina had worn it proudly. Now she carefully lifted it free. The movement felt unreal, impossible. No one spoke. No one moved. Even Kaelor finally stopped talking. Confusion crossed his face as he watched his wife remove the symbol of her position. The entire plaza stared, frozen, waiting. Serafina looked at the crown for several seconds. Then she stepped forward and placed it gently upon the royal podium. Not thrown, not discarded. Returned. The distinction mattered. Finally, she looked directly at Kaelor. The king suddenly felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Then, Serafina spoke 4 simple words. "You've made your choice," and the kingdom knew nothing would ever be the same again. For several seconds after Serafina spoke, nobody moved. The royal plaza remained trapped in stunned silence. Thousands of people stared at the Luna crown resting on the podium. The symbol of 10 years. The symbol of a marriage. The symbol of a kingdom, now abandoned between a husband and wife who suddenly looked like strangers. Kaelor frowned, not because he understood what was happening, because he didn't. That was the problem. Even now, standing before the entire kingdom, he still hadn't grasped the magnitude of his mistake. Serafina. He said her name, casually, almost absent-mindedly, the way someone calls after a person leaving a room, not a person leaving their life. The Luna didn't stop. She turned away from the podium and began walking toward the palace steps, calmly, gracefully, without hesitation. The crowd watched in complete disbelief, because they understood something the king apparently did not. This wasn't a dramatic gesture. This wasn't an argument. This wasn't a threat. It was a decision, a final one. "Serafina," Calor called again, this time louder. Still she didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't acknowledge him. The silence, spreading through the plaza, felt heavier than any scream. Nearby, several council elders exchanged grim looks. One foreign ambassador leaned toward another. What just happened? The answer came from a neighboring noble. The Luna left. The ambassador frowned. She'll return. The noble shook his head slowly. No. A pause. She won't. Because everyone who truly knew Serafina understood something important. She was patient, reasonable, compassionate, but she was not impulsive. If she removed the Luna crown in public, the decision had not been made today. Today was simply the day she acted on it. The realization unsettled everyone, except Calor, at least not yet. Vivian stepped back quietly. For the first time all afternoon, uncertainty appeared on her face, because this wasn't the victory she'd imagined. The crowd wasn't admiring her. They weren't celebrating her. They were watching Serafina disappear. And somehow that made everyone else seem insignificant. The ceremony ended early. No official announcement explained why. None was needed. The kingdom had witnessed enough. By sunset, the entire capital was talking about one thing. Not the king's speech, not the celebration, the Luna crown, the walk away, the choice. Inside the palace, servants moved through the halls in uneasy silence. No one knew what would happen next. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some claimed the Luna locked herself in her chambers. Others claimed she confronted the king privately. A few insisted reconciliation was already underway. Every rumor was wrong, because while the palace speculated, Serafina was packing. Not emotionally, not dramatically, methodically, carefully, as though she'd already rehearsed every step. By midnight, several trusted attendants helped prepare her belongings. Before dawn, a carriage waited beyond a private palace gate. No royal escort accompanied her. No farewell ceremony marked her departure. Only quiet determination. And as the first light of morning touched the horizon, Luna Serafina Vieira left the capital behind, without the crown, without the title, without the man who never realized she was truly gone until the kingdom started falling apart. At first, Calor believed the situation would calm down. That was his second mistake. The first had happened on the platform. The second happened afterward. Like many people who take loyalty for granted, he assumed there would be another conversation, another opportunity, another chance to explain. Surely Serafina simply needed time. Surely she would return. Surely 10 years of marriage could not end in a single afternoon. Unfortunately, reality disagreed. The consequences arrived immediately. 3 foreign delegations canceled pending negotiations. Not permanently, officially, but everyone understood the message. Those agreements existed largely because Serafina had spent years building trust with neighboring territories. Now she was gone, and so was that trust. A week later, several charitable organizations suspended royal partnerships. Community leaders requested clarification regarding future funding and support. The palace struggled to provide answers, because nobody knew the answers, not even the king. Then came the regional governors. One by one, they submitted reports detailing delays, confusion, and administrative problems. Projects that normally ran smoothly suddenly stalled. Miscommunications increased. Small issues became larger ones. The pattern repeated across the kingdom, everywhere. The deeper officials investigated, the more unsettling the truth became. Serafina's influence existed far beyond ceremonial duties, far beyond public appearances. She had quietly built systems, relationships, networks, structures. The invisible foundations beneath countless successful programs. Foundations no one appreciated because they rarely saw them. Until now. One afternoon, Kaylor attended a meeting regarding agricultural development. A simple matter. Or it should have been. Instead, the discussion descended into disagreement almost immediately. After nearly an hour, the exhausted minister finally sighed. The Luna usually handled this. The room fell silent. Kaylor frowned. What exactly did she handle? Several advisors exchanged surprised looks. One answered carefully. Most disputes involving regional cooperation. Another added, and community coordination. A third cleared his throat. Also, several funding partnerships. The list continued, and continued, and continued. With every answer, Kaylor felt increasingly uncomfortable, because he genuinely hadn't known. Not the scope of it, not the scale, not how much of the kingdom functioned, because Seraphina quietly ensured it did. Days later, another crisis emerged. Then another. Then another. The same explanation followed each time. The Luna managed that. The Luna organized that. The Luna resolved that. The phrase became impossible to escape. By the end of the second week, Kaylor hated hearing it. Not because it was inaccurate, because it was, painfully, humiliatingly, accurate. One evening, after a particularly difficult council session, the king wandered through the palace alone. The halls felt strangely different now, quieter, emptier. Eventually, he reached the royal wing. Without thinking, he glanced toward the throne room, then stopped. For the first time, he noticed something unsettling. The secondary throne remained empty. No Luna occupied it. No replacement sat beside him. No one filled the space Seraphina left behind. And suddenly, the empty seat felt less like furniture, more like evidence. Evidence of absence, evidence of failure, evidence of someone whose value became visible only after she disappeared. That night, unable to ignore the growing questions any longer, Kaylor made a decision. He needed answers, real answers, not rumors, not reports, not assumptions. Only one place could provide them. Late that evening, the king stood before the door to Seraphina's private study, a room he hadn't entered in years. Slowly, he reached for the handle and stepped inside. Seraphina's study looked exactly as she had left it. Orderly, elegant, quiet. Moonlight filtered through tall windows, casting pale silver across the room. Nothing appeared disturbed. Nothing appeared rushed, which somehow made her absence feel even more real. Kaylor stepped inside, slowly. For a moment, he simply looked around. The room felt unfamiliar, not because he had never seen it, because he had never truly paid attention to it. Much like its owner, bookshelves lined the walls. Maps covered several tables. Neatly organized folders occupied every available surface. The sheer volume of work surprised him immediately. Community development reports, educational initiatives, trade agreements, charitable programs, diplomatic correspondence, page after page of responsibilities. He never realized Seraphina managed personally. Kaylor moved deeper into the room. His discomfort grew with every document, because the evidence was impossible to ignore. For years, he assumed Seraphina assisted the kingdom. The truth was far larger. She helped hold parts of it together, quietly, consistently, without recognition. Hours passed. The king barely noticed. Then he found the letter, a single envelope resting in the center of her desk, addressed simply, Kaylor. His chest tightened unexpectedly. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. For several seconds, he stared at it, then opened it carefully. Inside rested a single page. No dramatic farewell, no pages of accusations, No list of grievances, just one paragraph. Kaylor began reading. A mistress didn't destroy our marriage. The first sentence alone made him flinch. He continued, Your decision did. The room suddenly felt smaller, quieter, harder to breathe in. Not because you loved another woman. Kaylor closed his eyes briefly, then forced himself to continue, but because you stopped respecting the one standing beside you. The words landed harder than anger ever could have, because they were true, painfully true. Every dinner he skipped, every conversation postponed, every moment he dismissed her presence, because he assumed it would always remain. The letter wasn't describing one mistake. It was describing years of them. There is no rival in this story, Kaylor. His grip tightened around the paper. Because Serafina was right. This had never been about Vivienne. Not really. Vivienne simply exposed a problem that already existed. The final sentence shattered whatever defenses remained. Only a choice. And you made it publicly. Silence filled the room. Complete silence. Kaylor lowered the letter slowly. For a long moment, he simply stared at the desk, unable to move, unable to argue, unable to deny a single word, because every sentence carried the weight of truth. And truth is difficult to fight when you finally see it clearly. Hours later, as dawn approached, a knock interrupted the silence. One of his advisors entered cautiously. My king. Kaylor looked up. The advisor hesitated, then placed a report on the desk. We've finally located her. The words instantly cut through the fog of regret. Kaylor straightened. For the first time in weeks, his attention sharpened completely. The advisor slid the report forward. A coastal territory several kingdoms south. Kaylor opened it immediately. The first page contained a simple summary. Luna Serafina Vire had not disappeared. She had begun building something new. And suddenly, the king realized there was only one thing left to do. He had to find her. The journey took 5 days. 5 days of uninterrupted thought, which proved unfortunate for Kaylor, because the more time he had to think, the more difficult it became to ignore the truth. Every mile seemed to carry another memory. A dinner he skipped, a conversation he postponed, a moment he assumed would always be available later. By the time he reached the coastal territory, regret had become impossible to separate from reality. Still, he continued, because somewhere beyond the cliffs and harbors lay the woman he had spent months trying to understand. The territory sat beside a vast blue sea. Fishing villages dotted the shoreline. Merchant ships crowded newly expanded docks. Construction projects appeared everywhere. The entire region felt alive, busy, growing. The transformation impressed him immediately, especially after learning who was responsible. The answer came quickly. You're looking for Lady Serafina? The harbor official smiled. Not nervously, not formally, warmly, as though speaking about someone genuinely admired. Kaylor nodded. The official pointed toward the waterfront. You'll find her there. Of course. The king followed the path overlooking the harbor. The sounds of construction echoed through the air. Workers unloaded supplies. Engineers reviewed blueprints. Merchants discussed trade routes. Everywhere he looked, progress surrounded him. Then he saw her. Serafina stood near a long wooden table, covered in maps and plans. Several community leaders listened attentively as she spoke, confident, focused, respected. Kaylor stopped walking, because for the first time since she left, he truly saw her. Not as Luna, not as his wife, as herself, and the sight unsettled him. Not because she looked different. She didn't. The difference was something deeper. She looked lighter, as though a burden had been removed from her shoulders. People approached her constantly. A fisherman thanked her for helping expand the harbor. A merchant praised a trade initiative she organized. A village elder greeted her with obvious affection. The admiration felt natural, earned, and impossible to miss. For years, Calor had watched people respect Serafina. Now he understood something important. This wasn't respect for a title, it was respect for her. The woman, not the Luna, not the crown, her. Eventually, Serafina looked up. Their eyes met across the harbor. Surprise flickered across her face. Briefly, then disappeared, replaced by calm recognition. Nothing more. No anger, no tears, no visible resentment. Somehow, that felt worse, because she looked exactly like someone who had already moved on. Calor approached slowly. The leaders around her noticed immediately and stepped back, giving them space. For several moments, neither spoke. The sea breeze moved between them. Finally, Calor broke the silence. "Serafina," she offered a polite smile, the kind given to old acquaintances. Not husbands, not former partners, just people from another chapter of life. Calor. The distance contained within that single word hit harder than any accusation, because for the first time, he understood what absence truly meant. Not missing someone, losing your place in their future. Still, he had not traveled 5 days to remain silent. There were things he needed to say, things he should have said long ago. So he took a breath and asked the only question that mattered. "Will you speak with me?" Serafina studied him quietly, then nodded once, and together they walked away from the harbor, toward a conversation both of them knew was long overdue. The path overlooking the sea was quiet, far enough from the harbor to avoid interruptions, close enough to hear the waves striking the cliffs below. For several minutes, neither spoke. The silence wasn't hostile. It simply carried the weight of everything left unsaid. Eventually, Calor stopped walking. Serafina turned toward him, waiting, patient as always. The realization stung. Even now, after everything, she remained more gracious than he deserved. "I was wrong." The words came out quietly, without excuses, without qualifications, just truth. Serafina nodded once. Yes, the simple agreement hurt more than anger would have, because there was nothing to argue against. Calor looked toward the ocean, then back at her. "I thought I had time." The confession sounded foolish now, but it was honest. "I thought we'd talk later. I thought we'd fix things later. I thought you'd always be there." Each sentence felt worse than the last, because he finally understood what those assumptions really meant. Complacency, neglect, entitlement. Serafina listened without interruption. When he finished, she folded her hands together. The ceremony wasn't the beginning. Calor nodded immediately. "I know. The anniversary celebration merely exposed what already existed. The damage had happened long before that. Long before Vivian. Long before the rumors. Long before the public humiliation. It started years earlier." Serafina's voice remained calm, measured, painfully reasonable. "When you stopped seeing me as a partner." The words settled heavily between them. Calor lowered his gaze, because once again she was right, not intentionally, not maliciously, but gradually. He stopped asking for her opinion, stopped making time for conversations, stopped noticing her contributions, until eventually her presence became something he expected rather than appreciated. Serafina continued. "People think I left because of Vivian." A faint smile appeared. "They're wrong." Calor looked up. She wasn't smiling because the situation amused her. She was smiling because the misunderstanding felt almost ironic. Vivian wasn't the reason. The statement surprised no one. Not anymore. Then what was? Seraphina held his gaze. Respect. One word. Simple. Devastating. The sea breeze moved around them. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then she continued. When you took her hand in front of the kingdom, you answered a question I'd been asking myself for a long time. Kaelor's chest tightened. What question? Seraphina's expression softened slightly. Where did I stand in your priorities? The answer had arrived publicly, before thousands of witnesses, and that was the part he could never undo. Not the gesture itself, what it represented. For the first time, genuine shame entered Kaelor's voice. I'm sorry. I know. The response came immediately. Not dismissive, not cold, simply true. She believed him. That somehow made everything worse, because regret did not change consequences. Finally, Kaelor asked the question he'd been carrying since arriving. The question he already feared he knew the answer to. Come back with me. The words hung between them. Fragile, hopeful, desperate. For a long moment, Seraphina said nothing. Then she smiled, sad, kind, final, and Kaelor understood the answer before she ever spoke. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the cliffs. Waves crashed against the rocks below. The world continued moving, as it always did, even when lives changed forever. Seraphina looked at Kaelor and saw a man she had once loved deeply, a man she had built a kingdom with, a man she had spent years hoping would notice what was happening between them. And standing there now, she believed his regret was genuine. That was the tragedy, because sincerity and timing are not the same thing. Kaelor waited. Hope lingered in his eyes. Fragile, desperate, human. Finally, Seraphina answered. No. The single word carried no anger, no bitterness, no desire for punishment, only certainty. The kind certainty she once offered him, the kind he failed to value until it disappeared. Kaelor lowered his gaze. The answer hurt, yet he couldn't honestly claim surprise, because deep down, he already knew. Some things can be forgiven, not repaired, and some choices create consequences that no apology can erase. Seraphina stepped closer, not as a wife, not as a Luna, simply as a woman speaking the truth. For years I stayed. Her voice remained calm. I stayed through distance. I stayed through neglect. I stayed through being overlooked. Kaelor listened silently, because every word was deserved. I gave chance after chance. A faint smile appeared. Not bitter, reflective. Most people think strong women leave quickly. She shook her head. The opposite is usually true. The statement settled heavily between them, because it was true. Strong people rarely walk away after the first disappointment. They stay. They try. They hope. They forgive. Again and again. Until eventually there is nothing left to save. Seraphina looked toward the sea. When I removed the crown, I wasn't ending a marriage. Her gaze returned to him. I was accepting that it had already ended. The honesty struck harder than any accusation ever could, because somewhere inside himself, Kaelor knew exactly when it happened. Not during the ceremony, not when Vivian appeared. Years earlier, one unnoticed moment at a time, the silence stretched between them. Then Seraphina smiled. A genuine smile, the kind he hadn't seen in a very long time. I hope you become the king this kingdom deserves. The words carried no resentment, only grace. And somehow, that felt like the greatest gift she could still offer him. A short while later, Kaelor left, alone. The journey back to Silvercrest felt longer than the one that brought him there. Not because of distance, because of understanding. Years passed. The kingdom continued. The throne remained occupied. The Luna crown remained untouched. No replacement ever wore it. No ceremony reclaimed it. And whenever young rulers asked King Calor about leadership, he shared the same lesson. Never confuse loyalty with permission to neglect. Never mistake patience for endless tolerance. And never force someone to publicly witness where they rank in your priorities, because the strongest people rarely leave after the first disappointment. They leave after giving you countless opportunities to notice. Seraphina never returned for the crown. She didn't need to, because the crown had never been the source of her value. She left it behind and took with her everything that had truly made it meaningful.